She was forced to marry an arrogant doctor, not knowing he was a billionaire who'd fall for her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The fluorescent lights of St. Alban Medical Center hummed with a cold, clinical glow as Mia Clark stood outside the glass-walled conference room, her fingers trembling around the strap of her thrift store purse. She could hear voices inside, low, stern, decisive, the kind of voices that decided people's futures without asking permission. She swallowed hard. Her mother's medical bills were stacked on the kitchen counter back home like a growing mountain, and the notice from the landlord warning of eviction sat right on top. Her younger brother's text from that morning replayed again. Mia, they said Mom needs another scan. They won't do it unless we pay. What do we do? She had no answer then. She had even less of one now. The door opened with a hiss. Dr. Adrian Hale stepped out, tall, sharp-jawed, a white coat hanging from his arm. His expression was carved from ice, precise, perfectly controlled, and impossible to read. Arrogant. Everyone in the hospital whispered that word whenever he passed. But today, arrogance wasn't what scared Mia. It was the look in his eyes, cold purpose, like he had already chosen something and she had no way out. Mia Clark? He asked, voice clipped, almost impatient. She nodded, throat too tight to trust her voice. Come inside, he said, turning without waiting. She followed, heart pounding against her ribs like it wanted to escape. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and expensive cologne, a strange mix that made her feel even more out of place. Adrian closed the door and faced her. I'll be direct, he said. You need money. A lot of it. Heat burned her cheeks. How do you? I checked your mother's file. The overdue balances. The eviction notice. Your brother's school debts. Her breath stuttered. You had no right. I had every right, Adrian. Cut in, his tone crisp. Because I intend to solve it. She blinked, stunned. Solve it. Before she could form words, he slid a thin folder across the table. I need a wife. A legal one. Immediately. Her heart stopped. What? Think of it as a contract, he said, arms folding over his chest. Short-term. Public. Beneficial to us both. You can't be serious. I'm never anything else. She stared at him. Why me? His jaw flexed, a flash of something, anger? Regret? Passing in his eyes before he smothered it. Because I cannot afford a scandal right now. The board is watching every move I make. A married man looks stable. Controlled. Predictable. So you just decided? She whispered. That I'm convenient? I decided, Adrian said evenly, that you need help. And I need a solution. Mia felt dizzy, like the air had thinned. This is insane. Perhaps, he said calmly. But insanity won't pay your mother's hospital bills. Her breath hitched. Cruel as his words sounded, they were true. Ruthlessly, painfully true. He pushed the folder closer. Inside is a marriage agreement. 3 rules. 1. You do not interfere with my work. 2. You attend every required event with me. 3. You do not fall in love with me. Her eyes snapped up. Why would you assume? Because people get confused, he said coolly. This is not romance. It's strategy. Heat pricked her eyes. Anger or humiliation, she couldn't tell. And what about you? She managed. Do you promise not to fall in love with me either? For the first time, his expression cracked, just slightly. A muscle ticked in his jaw, and he looked away for half a second before recovering. That won't be a problem. His confidence irritated her more than it should have. She exhaled, trembling. Why me, Adrian? I'm nobody. I'm just me. Exactly, he said quietly. You're not here for my money. Or my position. You don't pretend. You don't flatter. You don't chase anything except survival. That makes you useful. The word stung like a slap. Useful. She wasn't a woman to him. She was a tool. A solution. A check mark on a form. Sign it, he said, tapping the folder. And everything you need, your mother's treatments, your home, your debts, it all disappears today. Her vision blurred with the weight of choice, freedom for her family, or the surrender of her own life. She hesitated. Just for a second. And Adrian watched, completely still, as if he already knew her answer. Because deep down he did. And that terrified her more than anything. Mia's fingers brushed the pen. The contract felt like a door she couldn't close again. Her heart whispered no. Her life whispered yes. And somewhere between those two truths, her fate began to shift. The pen felt heavier than it should have in Mia's hand, like it carried the weight of every sleepless night she had spent juggling bills and every look of worry she had seen on her brother's face. For a long moment, she could only stare at the signature line, her breath caught somewhere between panic and surrender. Adrian watched in stillness, that unreadable doctor's expression fixed on her like he was examining a patient and waiting for the symptoms to appear. When she finally pressed the pen down and signed her name, the faint scratch of ink across paper felt like a door locking behind her. Adrian reached out, took the folder, and closed it with a quiet snap that seemed to echo in the sterile room. "It is done," he said. His voice did not soften, not even by an inch. Mia's pulse fluttered. "What happens now?" Adrian stood, sliding the contract into his leather briefcase. "Now," he said, "you move into my home this evening. There are expectations you must meet immediately. Our first public event is tomorrow." Her stomach tightened. "Tomorrow. Board dinner," he replied. "Do not be late." He stepped toward the door, paused, and looked back as if remembering something trivial. "Pack lightly. My staff will assist you when you arrive." And just like that, he was gone. Mia stood alone in the silent room, her knees threatening to give way. The ring of fluorescent lights blurring overhead as reality settled into her bones. She had just agreed to marry a man who looked at her like a business arrangement. But when she walked out of the hospital into the crisp afternoon air, her phone buzzed with a message from her brother. Mom had her scan. They said someone covered everything. "Mia, what did you do?" She closed her eyes, feeling the sting behind her eyelids. She typed back slowly. "It is going to be okay. I promise." She prayed it was true. That evening, Mia arrived at the address Adrian had texted her. She expected a nice house. Maybe something modern. Something clean and minimalist like him. She did not expect the mansion that rose before her like something out of another universe. All stone columns, tall windows, and a front lawn so perfectly trimmed it looked unreal. Her thrift store suitcase felt embarrassing in her hand. A uniformed housekeeper opened the door. "Miss Clark." Mia nodded. "Right this way." The foyer was massive, the marble tiles glowing under warm lights. Every step Mia took felt too loud, too unworthy of the space. "Dr. Hale is in his study," the housekeeper said. "He asked that you meet him there right away." Of course he did. She followed the long hallway lined with framed certificates, medical awards, and glossy magazine covers featuring Adrian's face. Miracle surgeon of the West Coast. The young doctor redefining emergency medicine. The Hale standard. Arrogant, she thought. Completely arrogant. She knocked on the cracked open study door. "Come in," Adrian said without looking up from his computer. Mia stepped inside, clutching her suitcase strap like a lifeline. "I am here," she said quietly. Adrian lifted his gaze. For a second, just a second, something flickered across his face. Surprise? Confusion? She could not tell. "Good," he said. "Sit." She did. He reached into a drawer, pulled out a slim document, and placed it on the desk between them. "This contains the schedule for the next week. You will attend fittings in the morning, etiquette training at noon, and briefing at 6. Keep your phone on at all times." Mia blinked. "Etiquette training? You will be stepping into rooms where appearances matter," Adrian said. "I need you prepared." She frowned. "You make it sound like I am your employee." He paused his typing. "You are my wife. That position carries responsibility." Her pulse skipped. Wife. The word felt too big, too heavy, too unreal. "This is not real," she whispered. "Not in the way that word usually means." Adrian looked at her then, really looked, as if measuring the tremble in her voice. "I did not choose this lightly," he said. "I need stability. The board must see me as settled, grounded. Marriage is the simplest solution." "To you," Mia murmured. "It is only simple to you." His jaw flexed. "You agreed." She swallowed hard. "Because I had to." Silence stretched between them, tight and fragile. Then Adrian stood, closing his laptop. "Follow me," he said. "I will show you your room." She expected a guest room, something modest. Instead, he opened the door to a spacious suite with soft lighting, a king-sized bed, and a balcony overlooking the city lights. It was more beautiful than anywhere she had ever lived. She set her suitcase down gently. This is too much. It is standard, Adrian replied. If we are going to convince the world we are married, you need to look like you belong here. She turned to him. Do you really think anyone will believe that I do? Adrian hesitated, just for a breath. They will, he said, because I will make them believe it. Then he stepped back, almost as if he feared standing too close to her. Good night, Mia. He closed the door behind him. And for the first time since signing the contract, she realized something unsettling. He had sounded less like a man giving orders, and more like a man protecting something he did not know how to name. Morning light spilled softly through the sheer curtains when Mia woke in the unfamiliar bed, her heart thudding as the memory of everything rushed back: the contract, the mansion, the man who spoke in commands instead of kindness. She sat up slowly, the sheets impossibly smooth against her skin, and for a moment she let herself breathe, because this room, this comfort, this safety was not hers and might never feel like hers. Yet today she was expected to play the role of a woman who belonged here. A soft knock sounded before she could gather herself. The door opened just enough for the housekeeper to peek in. Miss Clark, breakfast is ready. Dr. Hale asks that you join him in the dining room. Of course he did. Mia dressed quickly in the only decent outfit she owned, smoothing the wrinkles with her palms, wishing she had something more fitting. When she stepped into the hallway, she felt the mansion swallow her in its silence. The dining room was enormous, with windows that framed the city skyline like a painting. Adrian sat at the far end of the long table, a tablet in hand, a cup of black coffee untouched beside him. His gaze flicked up as she approached, briefly scanning her like he was assessing a chart. You are late, he said. She checked the clock instinctively. She was 2 minutes early. I apologize, she said anyway. His expression did not move. Sit. She did, folding her hands tightly in her lap. A server brought plates of eggs, toast, and fruit. Her stomach growled embarrassingly loud, but Adrian did not react. He simply scrolled through his tablet. Your fitting is at 9, he said. The stylist will meet you here. A fitting for what? Mia asked, trying not to sound defensive. For tomorrow's board dinner, Adrian replied, as if it was obvious. You will need something appropriate. She frowned. Appropriate. Presentation matters. You will be beside me. People will look at you. Judgments will be made. You make it sound like I am a prop, she muttered under her breath. Adrian paused, fingers stilling over the screen. You are not a prop, he said quietly. But understand that the board is critical of everything I do, including who I stand next to. He finally looked at her directly. I need you prepared. The sincerity in his tone startled her more than the arrogance that usually wrapped around every word he spoke. She looked down at her plate, unsure what to say. So she ate in silence while Adrian reviewed documents with the intensity of someone carrying the weight of an entire hospital on his shoulders. After breakfast, he stood. Stay here. The stylist will arrive shortly. And you? Mia asked before she could stop herself. He blinked once, surprised by the question. I have surgeries this morning, he said. I will return at noon for your etiquette session. He said it like a promise he had no intention of breaking. When he left, the mansion felt enormous again, but the silence was interrupted by the arrival of the stylist, a cheerful woman named Laura who swept into the room with an armful of dresses. You must be Mia, she said warmly. Let us make sure you do not just look the part, but feel it too. Hours passed in a blur of fabrics, shoes, jewelry, and gentle coaching. For the first time, someone looked at her without judgment, without calculation. Laura even smiled in approval when Mia stepped out in a deep navy dress that fit her like it was crafted just for her. You look strong in this, Laura said, like someone who could stand beside any man. Mia blushed, unaccustomed to compliments. I do not know if I can pull this off. You already are, Laura replied. Believe me. By the time noon approached, Mia felt almost calm. Almost. Until Adrian returned. He stopped mid-step when he saw her, and something subtle shifted in his expression, so fleeting she wondered if she imagined it. His eyes lingered just a beat longer than usual, scanning her not with cold assessment this time, but something closer to recognition. It works, he said finally, his voice lower than usual. Mia looked away quickly. The stylist chose it. The stylist chose well. He cleared his throat, almost awkwardly. Your etiquette session starts now. Come with me. They moved to a sunlit sitting room where he began explaining posture, introducing her to the kind of stem glass etiquette she had only seen in movies. He demonstrated, she tried, he corrected, she tried again, and somewhere in the middle of it, she noticed something startling. Adrian was gentle, still stern, still demanding, but his corrections were careful, his tone steady, as if he did not want to overwhelm her. At one point, her hand shook while holding a glass, and he stepped behind her, guiding her fingers with slow, precise movements. "Relax," he said softly. "You do not need to be perfect, just present." She could feel the warmth of him behind her, a steady presence she had not expected. "Why are you helping me so much?" she asked quietly. "Because," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "if you fall, I fall too." She turned slightly, surprise flickering across her face. "You never said that before." "I did not think I needed to." The room felt impossibly still. For the first time since signing the contract, Mia saw something new in him, something that lived beneath the arrogance and the cold professionalism. Vulnerability. And it unsettled her more than anything else had so far. The rest of the afternoon passed in a slow, steady rhythm as Mia practiced every gesture Adrian demonstrated, trying to absorb the rules of a world she had never belonged to, a world that moved with quiet confidence and sharp eyes, where a misplaced fork or a hesitant introduction could become gossip within minutes. By the time the sun dipped low through the wide windows, her shoulders ached and her nerves pulsed with exhaustion. But she kept going because she had to, because the board dinner tomorrow felt like the first true test of the contract she had signed. Adrian watched her closely, his arms folded, his expression unreadable, yet every so often she caught a flicker of something softer in his eyes, a silent acknowledgement that she was trying harder than anyone had the right to expect. When her hands trembled during the last round of introductions, he held up a hand. "That is enough for today," he said quietly. "You are tired." Mia sank into the nearest chair, the breath leaving her in a shaky exhale. "I am trying," she whispered. "I know," Adrian replied, his voice gentler than she had ever heard. "And you are doing better than you think." The words settled strangely in her chest, warm and unfamiliar. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed sharply. Adrian glanced at the screen and his jaw tightened. "I have to go. Emergency page." He grabbed his coat, but paused at the doorway. "Eat dinner tonight. Rest. The board can be demanding, but if you stay calm, you will handle it." She nodded, surprised he bothered to reassure her at all. After he left, the mansion fell quiet again, but this time the silence did not feel as suffocating. Mia wandered toward the balcony outside her room, the city lights glowing like scattered stars. She let the evening breeze brush against her skin and wondered how her life had spiraled into something she could not recognize. A forced marriage to an arrogant doctor who moved through the world like every door existed for him. Yet somewhere beneath his cold exterior, there were moments, tiny, fleeting moments, that made her hesitate before judging him too harshly. She wondered why. The next morning, the mansion buzzed with quiet preparation. Staff moved through the halls, floral arrangements arrived at the door, and the housekeeper double-checked the garments Mia would wear later. Mia's palms were damp with nerves by the time she reached the front hallway where Adrian waited, dressed in a black suit that fit him with sharp, effortless precision. He looked every bit the confident surgeon the world admired. Yet when he saw her approaching, that same unreadable flicker crossed his eyes again. She wore the navy dress they had chosen, paired with understated jewelry and a soft sweep of makeup. Adrian studied her for a long, unbroken moment, his gaze dropping briefly to her hands, then rising again to her eyes. "You look," he stopped, as if the word he wanted refused to come. "You look prepared," he finished, recovering quickly. She almost smiled. "Almost. I hope so," she said. "I do not want to embarrass you." His brow tightened. "If anyone embarrasses anyone, it will be the board, not you. They enjoy pressure. But you will be with me. Do not forget that." It was the closest thing to comfort he seemed capable of giving. They left the mansion and arrived at the Sterling Club, an elite venue glowing with crystal chandeliers and soft music. The moment they stepped through the doors, heads turned. Conversations paused. Eyes tracked them. Mia's stomach twisted, but Adrian's hand pressed lightly at her lower back, steady and grounding. "Breathe," he murmured. "Follow my lead." A man in a charcoal suit approached, his smile polished, but his eyes sharp. "Adrian," he said. "You brought company." Adrian's jaw tightened. "This is my wife, Mia." The word wife struck her like an electric spark. The man's eyebrows lifted, surprise barely masked. "I was not aware you married." "It was recent," Adrian said curtly. "Mia, this is Dr. Reynolds, head of the board." The man shook Mia's hand, his grip cool and assessing. "Welcome," he said. "I look forward to getting to know you." Mia felt the weight of his meaning, heavy and pointed. Judging. Measuring. Adrian sensed it too. His hand gently brushed her arm as if telling her she was not alone. As the evening unfolded, Mia followed every rule she had practiced. She introduced herself with calm confidence, navigated conversations with careful poise, and held her glass without trembling. But then, during a group discussion, one of the board members leaned closer and whispered just loud enough for Mia to hear. "She does not belong here. Look at her." Adrian must be desperate. Heat flooded her face. Her fingers curled unconsciously. Before she could react, Adrian stepped forward, placing himself subtly between Mia and the board member, his voice low and precise. "Say something like that again," he said, "and you can explain to the entire board why I am recommending your department for budget reevaluation." The board member paled instantly. Mia stared at Adrian, stunned. He turned to her, his voice softening just enough for only her to hear. "You did well," he said. "Do not let anyone make you doubt that." Something shifted in her then, something she did not expect, a quiet stirring in her chest that frightened her because it felt dangerously close to trust. And trust was not part of the contract. At least, it was not supposed to be. The car ride home from the Sterling Club was wrapped in a heavy silence, the kind that felt charged rather than empty, the kind that made Mia far too aware of Adrian sitting just inches away. City lights streaked across the windows as they drove through the night, and each one reflected in the sharp planes of Adrian's face, softening the arrogance that usually lived there. Mia kept her eyes forward, unsure what to say, unsure what he was thinking after stepping between her and the board member like a storm she never saw coming. Finally, halfway down the quiet road leading back to the mansion, Adrian spoke. "You handled yourself well tonight," he said. His tone was level, but there was a warmth there, subtle but unmistakable. Most people crack the first time they face the board. Mia swallowed, fingers tightening around the fabric of her dress. "It was overwhelming," she admitted. "I felt like I was being watched every second." "You were," Adrian said simply, "but you held your own." She turned to him then, studying his profile in the dim glow. "Thank you for stepping in when that man said those things." His jaw flexed. "Respect is not optional. Not for you." Before Mia could process his words, the car pulled into the driveway. Inside the mansion, the lights were low, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Adrian walked ahead, but slowly, as if waiting for her without actually saying it. At the base of the staircase, he paused. "Mia," he said, turning to face her, "do not let anyone convince you that you are less than you are. Not even for a moment." Her breath caught. "Why do you care?" His eyes flickered with something she could not name. "Because you are my wife." The words hit her harder than she expected, sending a strange warmth spiraling through her chest. She looked away quickly. "Good night, Adrian," she whispered. "Good night," he replied, his voice quiet in a way she was beginning to recognize as rare. The next morning arrived with a frenzy of hospital demands. Adrian had left early, long before breakfast. The housekeeper informed Mia that he had multiple emergency surgeries, which, strangely, made her feel a small tug in her chest. He had defended her last night. He had stood between her and every judging eye. So she spent the day practicing her posture, her introductions, and every rule he had taught her, not because it was required, but because she wanted to be good at it. For herself. And maybe, just maybe, for him. It was late afternoon when a call came through the mansion's line. The housekeeper answered, then rushed to Mia with urgency in her eyes. "Miss Clark, Dr. Hale needs you at the hospital immediately." Mia's heart stumbled. "Is he hurt?" "No, but he asked for you personally." The words made something tighten in her chest. She arrived at the hospital within minutes, rushing through the bright hallways, the smell of antiseptic thick in the air. Nurses moved quickly around her, murmuring about a critical patient, a failed transplant, and a board review happening at the same time. She found Adrian outside an intensive care unit, his shoulders tense, scrubs marked with long hours, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. When he saw her, he exhaled as though he had been holding his breath. "Thank you for coming," he said. "What happened?" Mia asked, stepping closer. "A transplant rejection. The family is devastated, and the board is evaluating whether the failure was due to negligence." His expression tightened, something sharp and vulnerable flashing through his eyes. "They are looking for someone to blame. But it was not your fault," Mia said immediately. "It does not matter," Adrian replied. "What matters is perception." He ran a hand through his hair, the first sign she had ever seen of him unraveling. "Mia, this could cost me everything." She took a breath, steadying herself, then did something she never imagined she would do. She reached for his hand. His eyes snapped to hers, startled, but he did not pull away. "You told me not to let anyone convince me I am less than I am," she said softly. "So I am telling you the same. You do not face this alone." His fingers tightened around hers, grounding and desperate. "I should not need you here," he said quietly. "This is not part of the contract." "Maybe not," Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I am here anyway." Something shifted then, something deeper than either of them expected, something neither of them were ready to name. For the first time, Adrian Hale, the arrogant doctor who built walls around every part of his life, looked at her as if she was not a contract or an obligation, but a lifeline he never planned for. And for a single fragile second, she wondered if the marriage that began as a transaction was becoming something dangerously close to real. The hallway outside the intensive care unit felt colder than the rest of the hospital, as if the air itself carried the weight of every life hanging in the balance. Mia stood beside Adrian, their hands still linked, his grip tight, as though he feared letting go would cause everything around him to collapse. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. She could feel his pulse thrumming against her palm, quick and uneven, nothing like the controlled man who had towered over the board members the night before. Adrian finally exhaled, a slow, heavy breath that carried too much exhaustion for one person. "They want to question me," he said quietly. "The board is already inside reviewing the case with the family." His voice was low, frayed around the edges. "They think I rushed the transplant. They think I made the wrong call." Mia stepped closer, lowering her voice. "But you did everything you could." "That does not matter," he said, his eyes dark with frustration. "When a life is lost, people want someone to blame. Sometimes even the truth is not enough." The doors to the conference room opened suddenly, and two board members stepped out. Their faces were sharp with tension. One of them gave Adrian an acknowledging nod. "Dr. Hale, we will call you in shortly. Be prepared to explain your decisions." Then their eyes shifted to Mia, lingering with quiet judgment. "And who is this?" Adrian's spine straightened at once. "My wife," he said firmly. The board members exchanged looks, but said nothing more as they walked away. Mia felt a flicker in her chest, something warm and unsettling. He did not hesitate, not even for a second. When they were alone again, Adrian rubbed his temple, fatigue settling into his bones. "I should have known they would turn this into a spectacle," he muttered. "They want to test my leadership. They want to see if I break." Mia shook her head. "Then show them that you do not." "It is not that simple," he whispered. "It never is." He sank onto a nearby bench, elbows resting on his knees, and for the first time Mia saw the man without the armor. No arrogance, no sharp edges, just a tired doctor who carried the weight of every life he had ever tried to save. She sat beside him, their shoulders almost touching. "Adrian," she said softly, "look at me." His eyes lifted to hers, and she felt the full force of the vulnerability he tried so hard to hide. "You cannot save everyone," she said. "No one can. But the fact that you care this much, that is what makes you good." He blinked, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. "You barely know me." "I know enough," Mia replied. "I know you fought for that patient. I know you fight for all of them." A muscle moved in his jaw. "You are not supposed to defend me like this." "Maybe not," she murmured. "But I want to." Silence pressed around them again, but this time it felt different, softer somehow. When the conference room door opened again, a nurse leaned out. "Dr. Hale, they are ready for you." Adrian stood, straightened his shoulders, and nodded. But before he stepped inside, he paused. "Stay," he said, meeting Mia's eyes with quiet urgency. "Please." She nodded instantly. I will be right here. The door closed behind him, leaving Mia alone in the hallway as doctors and nurses rushed past. She clasped her hands tightly, her heart racing as she imagined the questions Adrian would face inside. Minutes stretched painfully. Every now and then, a voice raised in frustration slipped through the door. Every time Mia heard it, she flinched. When the door finally swung open, Adrian stepped out, pale and tense. For a second, he looked like he was searching for air. Mia stood at once. Adrian. He did not speak. He simply reached for her hand, gripping it tightly as though grounding himself. They walked together to a quieter corner of the hallway. Her voice was gentle. Tell me what happened. He leaned against the wall, his breathing steadying. They questioned everything. Every decision. Every second of the surgery. His eyes closed briefly. But the family defended me. They told the board I stayed all night that. I explained every risk. They said I was the only one who gave them hope. Relief softened Mia's shoulders. Then you will be all right. He looked at her then, truly looked, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. I would not have walked into that room the same way without you here, he said quietly. You steadied me. Her heart fluttered, a dangerous sensation she tried to ignore. Anyone would have done the same. No, Adrian said, shaking his head. Not anyone. His voice dropped to a whisper. You. Mia felt something shift between them like the click of a lock turning, something delicate yet undeniable. Before she could speak, a nurse hurried over. Dr. Hale, the board wants a follow-up meeting in 30 minutes. Adrian's expression hardened. He straightened, letting go of Mia's hand slowly, reluctantly. All right, he said. But before following the nurse, he looked back at Mia, one final moment of unguarded honesty in his eyes. Do not leave, he said. I need you here. And as he walked away, Mia realized something quietly terrifying. She wanted to be there for him. Not because of the contract. Not because she was supposed to. But because somewhere between the lines of responsibility and survival, her heart had begun to shift toward him in ways she could no longer deny. Icy rain began to fall outside the hospital windows as evening crept in, streaking the glass with thin silver lines, but Mia barely noticed the weather. She sat on the bench where Adrian had left her, hands clasped tightly together, heart thudding with every passing minute. The hallway had emptied out as the shift changed, leaving behind only the soft hum of machines and the muffled footsteps of night staff moving between units. When Adrian finally returned, his shoulders looked even heavier than before, and the exhaustion etched into his features made Mia rise to her feet instantly. He stopped in front of her, exhaling a long, unsteady breath. It is done, he said. She searched his expression. What did they decide? They want more documentation, more statements, more everything, Adrian replied. But they will not suspend me. Not yet. Relief washed through her so quickly it made her dizzy. Adrian, that is good news. It is not bad news, he corrected, though his tone was far from celebratory. But it means more scrutiny. More pressure. His gaze dropped for a moment before lifting again, softer this time. Thank you for staying. Mia felt warmth bloom in her chest. I told you I would. He nodded slightly, but the lines around his eyes revealed a different truth, a deeper one. This was a man used to carrying burdens alone, and the idea that someone stood beside him seemed almost foreign. They walked out of the hospital together, the cool night air settling around them gently. Adrian unlocked his car and paused before opening the door for her, his eyes studying her face in the glow of the parking lot lights. You look tired, he said quietly. I am fine, Mia replied. I worried about you. He froze for a heartbeat, like he had not expected that kind of honesty. You should not, he murmured, though the words lacked conviction. I do anyway, she said. They drove back to the mansion in silence, but it was not the brittle silence of strangers. It felt warmer now, threaded with awareness and unspoken thoughts neither of them dared to explore. When they stepped inside the house, the warmth from the lights wrapped around them, chasing away the cold from the hospital. Mia moved toward the staircase, but Adrian called her name gently. Mia. She turned. He took a step closer, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Do not stay up worrying tonight, he said. You have done more for me today than anyone has in years. Her pulse stuttered. I wanted to help. You did, he whispered. More than you know. For a moment, they just stood there, the air between them charged with something neither of them had language for. But before anything more could be said, a sharp chime rang from Adrian's phone. He frowned at the screen. "It is the board," he muttered. "They want additional records by morning." He rubbed his forehead. "I will be in my study. Try to sleep." He walked away, but Mia could see the tension in every step. Hours passed. Mia tried to sleep, but worry gnawed at her. The memory of his tired eyes would not fade. Finally, unable to ignore the instinct pulling at her, she slipped out of her room and walked softly down the hallway. The door to Adrian's study was cracked open, a thin band of light spilling into the corridor. She pushed it slightly, peeking inside. Adrian sat at his desk surrounded by files and medical reports, his hair undone, his posture slumped in a rare display of vulnerability. His hands pressed against his eyes as if trying to push the exhaustion back inside. Mia stepped closer without thinking. "Adrian." He lifted his head sharply, then relaxed when he saw her. "You should be sleeping," he said. "So should you," she replied. His lips twitched into something almost like a smile, but it faded quickly. "I cannot. Not yet. I need to finish preparing this documentation. If there is one inconsistency, they will use it against me." Mia glanced at the piles of files surrounding him. "You cannot do all this alone." "I have always done it alone," he said quietly. "That is the problem," she whispered. He looked up sharply, eyes locking with hers. Something in his chest shifted. He did not say it aloud, but in that moment he realized he had forgotten what it felt like to have someone beside him, someone who stayed even when things got ugly, someone who cared. "Come here," he said softly, and she did, standing beside his chair as he handed her a stack of files. "Read me the timestamps. I will match them with the procedure logs." She nodded. They worked together, page after page, hour after hour, until the documents formed a complete, airtight timeline. When they finished, Adrian leaned back in his chair with a long exhale. "I could not have done that without you," he said. "You know that, right?" Mia shook her head gently. "You would have found a way." "Not tonight," he whispered. "Not like this." He looked at her then, the room quiet and still, and the gratitude in his gaze carried something deeper, something warmer, something dangerously close to affection. "Mia," he said softly, "I do not know what is happening between us." Her breath hitched. "Neither do I." His chest rose and fell, tension pulling at his voice. "But I am afraid of it." She stepped closer, her heart pounding. "Why?" "Because," he said, his voice barely audible now, "it feels real." And for the first time since the marriage contract began, they both understood the truth. Whatever this was, whatever was forming between them, it was no longer something either of them could pretend to ignore. The next morning came too quickly. The sky still faintly gray when Mia woke with the memory of Adrian's whispered confession lingering in her mind, the words replaying like a quiet echo she could not escape. "Because it feels real." She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to slow the unsettled rhythm of her heartbeat. But the truth was impossible to ignore now. The lines were blurring. The contract was no longer the container it once was. She stepped into the hallway, expecting silence. But instead she found Adrian standing at the far end, dressed in fresh scrubs, shoulders squared, hair slightly damp as though he had showered in a rush. He turned when he sensed her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he walked toward her, each step slow, deliberate, as if he was thinking through every possible outcome of this moment. "Good morning," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Did you sleep at all?" "A little," Mia admitted. "You?" "Not much." He paused. "But the documents are ready. I will present them to the board today." She nodded, offering a small, encouraging smile. "You will do well." Something flickered in his eyes at her confidence, something grateful and vulnerable. "Last night, I said more than I should have," he murmured. Mia's breath caught. "Did you mean it?" Adrian looked away for a moment, drawing in a long, steady breath. "Yes," he said. "That is the problem." Before she could respond, his phone vibrated sharply. He glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened, all trace of softness slipping away. "It is the board," he said. "They want me now." And just like that, the armor slid back into place. But as he turned to leave, he hesitated, his hand brushing against hers for the briefest second. A silent promise slipped between them. "I will be back," he said. "Wait for me." Mia watched him disappear down the hallway, the echo of his footsteps fading. Hours dragged by. She tried to distract herself, walking through the mansion's long hallways, touching the edges of framed photos, unfamiliar degrees, pristine awards, and polished surfaces that all screamed of a life she had never lived. But her mind kept drifting back to Adrian. The exhaustion in his eyes, the fear in his voice, the warmth in the way he said her name. Every minute felt heavier than the last. Finally, the mansion's phone rang. Mia rushed to answer, heart pounding. The housekeeper spoke nervously. "Miss Clark, Dr. Hale asked that I tell you he will be home soon." The meeting did not go as expected. Mia froze. Did something happen? He did not say. The words tightened like a knot in her stomach. Minutes later, the front doors opened. Adrian stepped inside, the weight of defeat hanging over him like a cold shadow. His posture was tense, his jaw set, and his eyes held a storm she had never seen before. She rushed toward him. "Adrian, what happened?" He exhaled sharply. "They want further review. One of the board members is pushing for disciplinary action." Mia felt her throat tighten. "Who?" His expression darkened. "Dr. Reynolds." The memory of his smug smile from the dinner flashed in her mind. "He said I am reckless," Adrian continued, frustration sharpening every word. "He said I am too emotional in surgery, that I make impulsive decisions." "That is not true," Mia said firmly. "Anyone can see how much you care." "That is exactly the reason they think I am weak," Adrian muttered. "That I make choices based on emotion rather than logic." He paced the hallway, agitation rolling off him. Mia watched, feeling something inside her snap. "This is not about your leadership," she said. "This is about him not liking the fact that you are married." Adrian stopped cold. His eyes lifted to hers sharply. "You think that matters?" "I know it does," Mia said. "He questioned me. He questioned us. And now he is using this case as leverage." Adrian's jaw tightened as he processed her words. "If that is true, then he is willing to destroy my career out of spite." "Unless we do something," Mia said. "Unless we show them the truth." Adrian stared at her, the storm in his eyes flickering into something else, determination. "What do you mean?" "You said the family defended you," she reminded him. "Let them speak again. Let them make a statement. Publicly. The board cannot ignore the people you saved." Adrian blinked, stunned by the clarity of her plan. "You think they will agree?" "If you ask," Mia said softly. "Not as a doctor, but as the human being who sat with them all night." Adrian stepped closer. Too close. "You believe in me," he whispered, the words trembling with something deeper. "Why?" "Because I see you," she said, her voice barely above a breath. "The real you." For a moment, the world stilled, the air between them thick with something unspoken. Then Adrian reached out, brushing his knuckles against her cheek with a tenderness that stole her breath. "If I lose everything," he whispered, "this contract will end." "I know," she whispered back. "And I am still here." His hand lingered, his voice cracking with quiet fear. "Mia, I do not know how to protect you from what comes next." "Maybe," she said, meeting his gaze steadily. "I am not the one who needs protection." The words hit him hard, carving through his defenses, and in that moment he understood a truth he had tried to avoid. Mia was no longer the fragile part of his life. She was becoming the strongest one, and the board, the scandal, the contract, none of it frightened him as much as the possibility of losing her. The next 48 hours unfolded like a storm neither of them could escape, a relentless swirl of board interrogations, accusations, and late-night analysis of medical charts. But through every moment Mia stayed by Adrian's side, her presence a steady force that kept him from unraveling completely. By the third morning, Adrian stood outside the hospital conference hall where the final review would be held, shoulders squared, but tension tightening every muscle along his jaw. Mia stood beside him, her hand brushing his just enough to remind him he was not walking into this alone. "Whatever happens in there," she said softly, "you face it with truth. That is all you have ever had." Adrian inhaled deeply, his eyes searching hers. "And if the truth is not enough? Then we fight," Mia replied, her voice firm, unwavering. "Together." He opened his mouth, as if to say more, but the door swung open and a board assistant called his name. Adrian stepped forward, then paused and turned back to Mia, his voice lowering to a whisper only she could hear. "If this ends badly, do not disappear from my life. Please." The vulnerability in his plea stunned her, warming her in a way she could not deny. "I will not," she promised. "Now go." He walked into the room with the quiet confidence she knew he had earned, and she waited outside, pulse thudding, hoping the board would finally see the man she saw. Minutes dragged into an hour, then another. Finally, the door opened and Dr. Reynolds stepped out, his expression unreadable. Mia straightened. "Is it over?" "Soon," he said, his tone clipped. "The family is giving a final statement." Mia's breath caught. This was it. Moments later, the patient's parents arrived, stepping into the boardroom with calm dignity. Mia watched them enter, watched their hands clasped together, and silently prayed they would speak the truth. When the doors at last reopened, Adrian stepped into the hallway, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, emotion trembling beneath the surface. Mia rushed to him. "What happened?" For a moment he did not speak, the tension coiling in the air. And then his expression cracked into something she had not seen in days, something relieved, something real. "They cleared me," he said. "The family defended me. Every member. They said I gave them hope, that I stayed with them until the last second. The board voted unanimously. I keep my position." Mia felt the breath rush out of her in a soft, shaky exhale. "Adrian, that is incredible." Before she could think, she wrapped her arms around him. Adrian stiffened in surprise for a heartbeat. Then slowly, hesitantly, his arms came around her, pulling her into his chest with a quiet desperation. The hallway blurred around them. "I could not have done this without you," he whispered into her hair. "You carried me when I could not carry myself." She closed her eyes, overwhelmed. "I meant what I said. I believe in you." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes bright with emotion he no longer tried to hide. "Then it is time I tell you the truth," he said, his voice thick. "The contract. I do not care about it anymore. Not the rules. Not the deadlines. None of it matters now." Her breath stilled. "Adrian." He cupped her face with both hands, the gentleness in his touch undoing every barrier she had built. "I fell for you," he whispered. "Somewhere between the chaos and the fear, I fell in love with you. And it terrifies me, because this began as something cold and calculated, and now I cannot imagine my life without you." Mia felt tears gathering, soft and uncontrollable. "I was afraid to feel it," she whispered back. "Afraid because it was not supposed to be real. But it is," he said, brushing a tear from her cheek. "It is the realest thing I have ever known." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the original contract, the pages that once dictated the rules of their lives. He held it up, eyes never leaving hers. "This is over," he said, and without hesitation, he tore the pages in half, the sound sharp and final in the quiet hall. The papers fell like soft snow to the floor. "No more agreements. No more pretending. If you stay with me, let it be because you choose me, not because you needed saving." Mia stepped forward, placing her hand over his heart. "I choose you," she whispered. "Not the doctor. Not the reputation. You." Emotion washed across Adrian's face, unguarded and profound. He pulled her into him, his forehead resting against hers. "Then come home with me," he murmured, "as my wife in every way that matters." The rest of the day passed in a blur of relief and quiet joy. When they returned to the mansion, Adrian stopped her in the entry hall, the glow of warm lights framing him as he reached into his pocket once more. This time, he held a small velvet box. "This," he said softly, "is not a symbol of a contract. It is a promise." He opened it, revealing a simple but breathtaking ring. "Mia, I do not want a marriage built on survival. I want one built on love. Will you stay with me, truly stay?" Tears slipped down her cheeks, but her smile was steady. "Yes," she whispered. "I will." Adrian slid the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling just slightly, and then he kissed her with a tenderness that felt like the beginning of a life neither of them ever expected to find. Their story had begun with rules and walls and impossible choices, but it ended with something stronger than circumstance, something they both chose freely: love, real and undeniable, finally unbound.